Yeah, I love the lyrics of that last one, right? It kind of gives us our marching orders. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim, right? So I want to talk about what it means to be emboldened by our faith. But first, let's talk about maybe some of the places we might not be. So tell me where you got the idea of what your life was supposed to look like.
Mom, dad, school.
Right. What did they tell you success was? Work hard. Make lots of money. What was your family supposed to look like?
Mom, dad, kids.
Mom, dad, kids. You're supposed to own a house?
Of course.
Probably has a picket fence, right? You have a car payment and a mortgage. This is what we've been handed as a script of success. But how much of what you've determined in your life as success has emerged from your own soul? More every day, amen. Amen. I want to share this quote from the book I was reading this summer, and we're talking about this month, from Mia Birdsong's How We Show Up. Without accessible, celebrated models of what happiness, purpose, connection, and love look like outside the American dream model, we are often pulled back towards it. I feel this tugging all the time. And by the way, if you haven't read the book, Mia Birdsong is a Black activist, author, thinker. Okay. So she says, I feel this tugging at me all the time. I've achieved just enough of the American dream that sometimes it has me thinking, maybe, just maybe it is for me. Just maybe the security and sparkle are real. Deviating from the beautiful packaged path can seem reckless and even arrogant. I mean, I don't have just myself to consider. I have my husband and my kids. Who the hell am I to question this reward? Sometimes I just want to ignore all the obvious holes in the story, the places where the lies show through the facade, and just let the current take me. Right? Sometimes we just want to stay asleep. Sometimes it's just easier to acquiesce to the pressures of culture. To stop trying to step outside of the norms, to leave the herd. Sometimes it's just easier to just let the herd move you along. You know? But this is where the queer community has a lot to teach us. I want to share this quote that was also shared in Mia Birdsong's book, but it got famous online. It's so weird that we now refer back to social media as if it's a thing. But it went viral on social media some years ago, and it's from poet Brandon Wendt, who wrote, "Not queer like gay, queer like escaping definition. Queer like some sort of fluidity and limitlessness all at once. Queer like a freedom too strange to be conquered. Queer like the fearlessness to imagine what love can look like and to pursue it." This is when queering becomes spiritual practice. And we have a lot to learn from this idea, to be strange enough to not be conquered. To be willing enough to be fluid in the unknown and limitless in what we believe to be possible. And when you are in a coming out process, there is a requirement in that to go within and claim the truth of yourself. And then be willing to be the expression and the aliveness of that truth. And this is a fundamental skill that you and I need, whether we identify as queer or not, to live the emboldened faith we were just singing about. to be willing to live from the inside out and let our lives be a reflection of this internal truth and holiness that is definitely going to go in the face of the American dream. Because the American dream was never meant to satisfy your soul. It was designed actually to keep you separate from it so that you would not have a sense of your own power. So queering your families, queering your sense of belonging, queering your spiritual life is the place where you step inside to a different authority. Yes? And then you come out, and you come out again, and you come out some more, because you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go do this other thing. I know y'all are doing that. I'm going to be over here doing this. And you do it unapologetically, out loud. And this becomes possible because we anchor ourselves and we allow ourselves to be emboldened by the truth that lives within us. We allow ourselves to be empowered from within. And we do that even more strongly when we do it with each other. When we allow each other to be our mates in it. Right? When we allow each other to be the amplifier of your truth, of the energy you want to bring forward in your life, gets amplified when we get together. And then we can amplify each other, right? This is literally the way that it works in the physics of our energy bodies, right? When we get together, we're going to either sync up and lift that, or we're going to sync up to some other stuff, and we're going to be over here with the herd, uplifting that. So it becomes our practice to be willing to be queer. To be willing to leave the herd and be a stand for your own inner knowing. For the morality that lives in you as a divine being. And when we choose to do that intentionally together, we can move into one of the concepts that Mia Birdsong pointed out in her book, anamkara, which is a Celtic word for soul friend. And so I wanted to share what that means from a book called Soul Friend by John O'Donohue. He says, in everyone's life there is a great need for an anamkara, a soul friend. A soul friend is a loved one who awakens your life in order to free the wild possibilities in you. I love that so much. Don't you want a bunch of those kind of friends? A bunch of friends who are like, girl, get crazy with it. Go do that and do it big and loud and forget all the rest. We need those friends. We need the friends that are like, I see the absolute oddity of you and I celebrate it. It's the place where you and I can begin to explore the belonging that is actually the truth of us. A lot of us get stuck in this seeking for belonging out here, right? We seek a group to accept us. We seek rooms like these to feel a part of. But when you know you're belonging here, it becomes something that you can do with yourself and other people that begins internally. You're no longer dependent on somebody else's acceptance. Right? Because you know how to belong to your own self and belong to your divinity and belong to the fabric of aliveness that is the life of the Holy Blessed One, then you don't need anybody out here to tell you you belong, to demonstrate your worthiness to you. Now we get together and release the wild possibilities of each other. Because we're not out here trying to fit in. You know, one of the blessings of being a queer, biracial girl growing up in this country was that just was never on the table for me. This script of the American dream wasn't on offer to me. So I never got bothered with trying to have it. I got to be freed of that pathway altogether. And it was such a blessing. Because I was free of that idea of success, so I just got to go out here and live. Free of all of these limitations that this American dream puts on us. I wasn't trying to have it, and they weren't trying to have me. And it's a freedom I think we all long for. This freedom to simply be who we are. To not have to apologize. How many of you have that bad habit of the I'm sorries? Yeah. You say something, you do something, oh, I'm sorry. Right? Like your existence is a problem. And yet the truth of this aliveness that you and I share is that we are literally the life of the Holy Blessed One. Could never be a problem. No need to apologize. We are here by divine appointment. And when we get into community with this idea of being soul friends, which means you and I have to do the work of being conscious and alive and awake to our own souls. Because I can't recognize the soul in you, the unique divine shape that you are, if I don't know that for myself. Right? I had a conversation with a community member this week who was struggling with being in community, as we do. And my response was, the more grace you can offer yourself, the easier community becomes. The more willingness to be a wild possibility in your own life, the more room you make for everybody else's wild possibilities. And then it gets really fun when we are all up in here committed to releasing wild possibility, and then what happens collectively to the collective possibility. When we are each individually willing to break ourselves open and to be more than we thought we could be. Yeah? I want us to come back to John O'Donohue and his explanation of the soul friend. He went on to say in his book Anamkara, in this love, the love of a soul friendship, you are understood as you are without mask or pretension. The superficial and functional lies and half-truths of social acquaintance fall away. Let me say that again. The superficial and functional lies and half-truths of social acquaintance fall away. That's one of the reasons why the herd feels easy. Because the lie is functional. Right? It helps you get the mortgage. It helps you get the lease. The functional lies of well-behaved humans, right? We get ahead inside of this system and structure of capitalism. We get ahead when we behave well. It's a functional lie to live. He goes on to say, as the social acquaintance falls away, you can be as you really are. It is precisely in awakening and exploring this rich and opaque inner landscape that the Anamkara experience illuminates the mystery and kindness of the divine. The mystery and the kindness of the divine gets illuminated inside of these relationships. These soul friendships where we come together with the sole intention of releasing the wholeness of one another, of being a place where your whole being gets to be welcomed into connection. Think for a moment of relationships in your life that maybe give you some of that, if not the full package, where you are allowed to just show up wholly unapologetically as you are. I really want you to think through this. Make a list if you got a list, if you're lucky enough. And And then I want you to find those people and thank them. Thank them for letting you show up as the divinity that you are. And if that list is short, or you don't have a relationship that is fully welcoming you, that becomes your homework. And it starts with who you are relating to in the mirror. Because it's inside these relationships that John O'Donohue is telling us that the inner landscape of the divine becomes more revealed. Not entirely, because he said opaque, right? Not crystal clear. Which is why the mystery of the divine and the kindness live inside these connections. We have to be willing to sit inside the mystery and the parts that are not entirely clear, right? Inside the messiness of our connections. We really want sort of the organizational flow chart inside each of our connections. We want to parse it out. We want to know, you do this, I do that, and this is our goal, and this is how we'll measure if we're doing it right, if you're doing it right. Which, if that is the nature of your connections, that is not a soul friendship. That's capitalism. We got to get used to allowing our soulfulness, the messy opaqueness of our inner lives, to be enough to guide us, to build our muscles of mystery, to not know. I'm going to show up, and I'm going to show up as honest and as authentic as I can, but because I know that I belong to me and I belong to the divine, you can't actually mess it up for me. You can't actually create harm to me. You may be shitty, but I'm good because I know who I am and whose I am. Which frees me to show up for you wholeheartedly with all your jerk-facedness if that's what shows up for you. And I don't have to worry about my belonging because it's not dependent on your acceptance. I don't have to worry about your behavior because if your behavior goes awry, I have a boundary. Right? Inside this model of flowchart relationships, we get real scared of the messy. We feel intolerant of the messy. We really think something has gone terribly wrong when someone misbehaves. Right? We want to take our ball and go home on a regular basis. I had a young person say recently, a teenage young person say, a friend that they had completely cut off and kicked to the curb, that, she was trying to be too cool. And so she was being so cool, she was sucking all the air out of the room. Which is hilarious to me, because teenagers, who does not suck all their air out of every room they walk into? But what made me laugh was that her solution was to end the friendship. Intolerable. This sucking the air out of the room, having the audacity to be so cool. But we do it. We do it. I want you to think of the people where you just have kicked them to the curb. You've shunned them because they misbehaved in some way. I would really like us to take shunning off the table. I really would. I know it sometimes feels really justified, and some behavior is atrocious. But if we took shunning off the table, we would develop the skills of boundaries. We would develop the skills of stating our needs and declaring, emboldened by faith, and declaring the place that God shows up as love. My favorite definition from Prentice Hemphill, who wrote What It Takes to Heal, everybody should be reading that book, is a boundary is the distance I keep you so that I can love you and love me. We don't get to kick anybody out. We don't get to kick people off the island of aliveness because they've behaved badly. We may need to move them over there. We may not be inviting them for dinner, but there's no need to shun and excommunicate someone else's aliveness. The breath of God is breathing everybody. And we then get to develop the skills and the muscles of togetherness. I learned recently, yesterday even maybe, that the word concert actually means togetherness. How cool is that? We just had a little concert, didn't we? Practicing togetherness through song. Live and in person. How cool is that? The practices are what make it possible for us to grow the muscles of togetherness, creating harmony, quite literally, even when we're uncomfortable, even when somebody stepped outside the flow chart, didn't do their job, or they did somebody else's job, right? We can move into this mysterious thing of aliveness that we are each here to share, to be. And hopefully, because we do so with intention and consciousness, we awaken the wild possibility of love as our own lives, as our community's life. The wild possibilities that we haven't even been able to name yet become possible. When we orient ourselves to our soul and move from our souls, what becomes possible is unconquerable, as our poet told us what queering makes possible. So strange that we become unconquerable. So willing to leave the herd and step outside of the flowchart that we dream ourselves into the world we want to be living in. The possibility of love's greatest becoming now starts to shape itself into the form of our actual lives. Because we said yes to genuine connection. Because we practiced the courage of genuine connection. Deciding the places that feel vulnerable, because I was thinking about this as well inside of connections. There's a lot of connections that do not make me feel vulnerable, that I feel quite comfortable inside of. And I was thinking, what are the ones that I feel vulnerable inside of? Because that's where my work is, right? Because I think, we live in an algorithm where we're not asked to step outside of our comfort zones, where we just echo chamber with each other, right? So we don't ever feel vulnerable. Or maybe some of us feel vulnerable all the time leaving our houses, which is also fair. But we often try to set up our lives, again, we like a flow chart. We like to set up our lives so that we can know what we're going to expect from the person across from us. Where we think we know what God looks like and what God's going to do next, right? We like that. That feels safe. We throw that word around a lot. I don't feel safe with that. Well, nobody said safety was guaranteed. That we didn't come to this life for safety. We came to live. So we have to be willing to give up the feeling of safety to step outside the boxes we've created that feel comfortable. I know what to expect. I know how this person thinks, and they think like I think, so we're good. Which leaves no room for the mystery, leaves no room for the wild possibilities we haven't thought of yet. And we keep getting what we got. And I'm sorry, what we got sucks. We can do so much better. I know us. The wild possibilities are so exciting. The world we want to dream and to be being, and who we need to be that, is dependent on our willingness to let go of this idea of safety and comfort and grow into mystery, living inside out, breaking the rules, damning the rules, trusting that there is something so much bigger and greater that has got us. Creating spaces, I learned this from Prentice Hemphill in a podcast just this week. Somebody asked them, what do we need in this moment in time, in this country, to dream the new world? And their answer was, we need spaces where that's what we come together to do. We need to take a note from the marooners and the slave communities where they literally just left their plantations and built new communities almost in plain sight, but were hiding and just did something else. And we need to be able to, inside the stressors, inside the culture that feels oppressive and ridiculous, create spaciousness, and that's a spiritual practice, so that we can begin the dreaming, the soul connections, the entertaining wild possibilities with each other. And that kind of work, that kind of skill is your spiritual practice. I know we're just like, let me just do some meditating and we're just going to sit here and I'm going to talk to God for a little bit, and I checked my box. I'm doing great inside my flow chart. And I'm saying to you, there is a bigger ask. When you decide that the soul in you, the aliveness of spirit as you, is the boss of your life. That it tells you, turn left. I know everybody else is going right. I'm telling you, go left. And go get your soul friends to come with you. Make time and space for those kinds of connections and for those kinds of conversations. That's the homework, actually. We started with some conversation if you were here last week. We had a little conversation tryout in the room. But now what I'm asking you to do is to intentionally and consciously develop a soul friendship with someone in your life. And set aside time for that connection. And that's its entire purpose. To be inside a connection where you can wholeheartedly, and even with all your ugly and messy, show up. And you create a space for someone else to do the same with you. This is world-building practice. This is how wild possibility becomes unleashed into the world, is when we start right where we are, with who we are. All right, who says yes to the homework assignment?
Yes.
All right, and for my beloveds watching online, I want you to raise your hand and say yes out loud. Right. Onward and upward to all my Anamkaras. Let's do this. I'm going to bring the musicians back up to close us out.